Hi, Sean.
I talked to you yesterday.
Good. You are fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes.
A great host. Sean is great. Listen to his show.
Absolutely, 95.5.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Shelley Winter Show. I've got to tell you, we're live, we're local, we're topical, and we're relevant, and we have a lot to talk about. But I just, this is not, you know, Magic Mike and I do show prep every night, and we do this, you know, the kind of schedule of the show. Mike, this is not on the schedule, right? So I'm kind of freestyling here for a second. But I got to tell you, man, one of the best perks of doing this, and I'm not brown-nosing or anything like that. I just want to tell people something. Eric Von Hessler and I talk like as we're shift changing, right? You know, it's just like anybody else. If you've ever worked, you know, first, second, third shift, you know, when you come into work, if your second shift, which is what, 6 to 2, no, usually 3 to 10, 3 to 11, if you're coming in for second shift and the first shift guy's there, you guys chop it up. You know, you're relieving him, or you're taking over, starting your shift, and that guy's getting off of his shift, and you always talk, right? And it's the same thing here. Like when he's packing up his stuff, and he's packing up to leave, and I'm settling in, plugging in my headphones, putting out my hundreds of stories that I'm going to get to, that I never get to, and we talk. And it's just, I wish at some point we've got to start recording these and just kind of dropping them as like, what do you call them? Like outtakes. You know, when you go to the movies, they have outtakes, and dropping them as outtakes. This is such fascinating conversations. All right, let me get started with the show. I apologize for going off script there, but I just had to tell you guys, he's just such a fascinating guy. All right, so USAID. Okay, let me back up. U.S. Agency on International Development, USAID. Okay, I switch back and forth between USAID and USAID because USAID just is it's so long. It's so much to say. Right? It's easier for me to say USAID. So I'll switch back and forth as I talk about this issue. And I wanted to point something out. So we all know the history. We all, you know, found out about the history of this organization. And when I went back and did some research and read about USAID, as you know, started by John F. Kennedy, and the stated purpose, right? When you read about it, the purpose of this thing was to blunt, as they say in the readings, in the research that I did, to blunt Soviet influence. In other words, the Soviet Union at the time was going around the world trying to get countries to be like them, more communist, and be underneath their protection, but to be communist countries. And we saw that. We said, well, if we help people, if we pay people, essentially, we can get them to be more capitalistic, more democratic, more hold elections and things like that, and be more like us. And be our allies. They were trying to get allies. We were trying to get allies. Two big superpowers trying to collect pieces on the board. That's essentially what happened. So they started this USAID. And now 2025, let's skip all the way ahead to now. 2025, we're looking at this organization and we're seeing things that we don't like. But let's be clear and let's be very honest as conservatives, particularly my Christian conservatives, my Christian brothers and sisters. We do want to help people, right? There are starving kids somewhere in the world that need to be fed. Right there in famine conditions. There's a desert. They don't grow any food there because the food can't grow. But, you know, let's send them some food. Let's help those people. Then the argument becomes, well, you know, Shelley, we could do that, but we need to take care of our own people first. And I totally agree with that. So here's where I'm going with this. I was on my social media this morning. And one of the pages that I follow is a good friend of mine, Rashad Ritchie, used to be over at another radio station. And there's a radio page for him. And I don't think he is involved with it anymore, but there are people who still talk to each other on that page. And that page pops up a lot on my social media. And a guy asked the question, is the money that's being found and all these, wasteful spending that's being found, will it come back to Americans? And I thought it was a fascinating question. And I said to myself, you know what? I need to talk about that tonight because it's a very good question. And I'll say this like this. Our argument as Republicans who want this USAID and Doge, we want this big. We want to see it work. We want to see the money. So every day it's like watching porn for some of us. Look, they wasted $9 million on this and $10 million on that. And like we like to see this every day. But there's a bigger question because part of when we see it, our argument is for them to find it, right? The argument for Doge is, by and large, we don't want to waste money, but also we all say the same thing. We have Americans who are in need. FEMA spent $59 million to house migrants, illegal immigrants in New York City in hotels, right? Take out all the superfluous, extra words. Luxury hotels. We could take that out. Say hotels. $59 million for food, hotels, all this stuff, right? We could take, right? We know that happened. FEMA did that. So our argument is there are people in North Carolina. There are people in California. But the question that we are not asking as supporters of Doge and supporters of freezing funding for USAID and freezing funding for the EPA, we'll get to Lee Zeldin's commentary later on, the question we're not asking, and we need to be asking as Republican voters, only we can ask this question because we voted for this, is that money that you're finding going back to the American people? Because it makes no sense to me if you find $59 million in FEMA funding that went to New York City for illegal immigrants to be housed and fed and clothed. It makes no sense to me to say, oh, let's give that back to the government and not give it back to the people in the American people who are in need. And that's any amount of money. Now, you might argue now and say, well, Shelley, the whole point of these cuts is because the government spends too much money. Well, that's true. But if we're not finding this spending and not giving at least some of it back to the people who are in need, who are American citizens, then one, we need to stop using that as the reason for looking for the money. And number two, more importantly, why not? Why not? If you found $59 million $59 million in FEMA funds or in one FEMA monies that went to New York City for illegal immigrants, then I know you at least have $50 million for North Carolina, if not the entire amount. Like, I don't want to save money so much that I lose sight of the fact that I have Americans who are in need. I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want any of us ever to lose sight of that. Because we can save trillions of dollars in wasteful spending. But if it's only going to go back to the government, then what's the purpose? I want to see us save trillions of dollars in wasteful, fraudulent, corrupt spending. And I need a lot of that money to come back to the American people, particularly those in need. And if we're not going to fight for that as Republicans, then we need to stop using "what about Americans in need" when we call for these cuts. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. It's the Shelley Winter Show. We're here till 9. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Lee Zeldin's comments today. A bomb blockbuster breaking news. That's next on the Shelley Winter Show. We will be right back.